What's a good word, everyone? It's your boy DKB here. I just want to say thanks for all the support. The channel's been steadily growing, and the number you see below, you can drop a text, shoot a voicemail, any ideas, topics, collabs, etc. you guys want to see. I'll include them in future videos and live streams, and I'll catch you again. Be easy. What's a good word, Jets fans? It's your boy DKB here, and with the way that Aaron Rodgers is continuing to take shots at the New York Jets, you would have thought that we never bent over backwards to make sure that he had everything that he was asking for from this organization. And Zack Rosenblatt dropped an article here that really looks a little bit further behind the scenes into just why and how Garrett Wilson and Aaron Rodgers' relationship really started deteriorating. There was a lot of small signs, even leading up to this report, right? And basically what we've seen on the field in 2024, because there was, multiple blow-ups over the course of the offseason, right? Where you can see Garrett Wilson clearly laying into Aaron Rodgers. And even at certain points, Aaron Rodgers looking like he's trying to defend himself before ultimately kind of glazing things over and giving the media what they wanted in terms of just a quick storyline, but ultimately trying to sweep it under the rug. But Zack Rosenblatt, again, peels behind the curtains a little bit here, and he does reference some of the press conference shots potentially, and my boy Green was one that actually dropped a quote or two from one of those press conferences from Aaron Rodgers, where he was mentioning that Garrett Wilson is so good that he potentially even psychs out or jukes out Aaron Rodgers when it comes to what he's expecting out there on the field, right? And with anyone that's been watching Garrett Wilson, not only both in college, but also with his time with the New York Jets so far, his improvising skills on the fly, whether it's a drawn up concept or we turn into backyard football, the way that he wins off the line of scrimmage is with a high level of athleticism, right? But two, it's the kind of unpredictability of what he's going to do, right? He might have one of the slowest get-offs, right? But he's going to create such a gap in coverage for the defender that he's going to give you an easy, quick, short route, but it may not sync up with your 1-2-3 drop step, right? Which is really going to be a huge problem for a guy like Aaron Rodgers, who is a stickler with process, is a stickler with the finite details. And so if he's going through a walkthrough, let's just say, for example, and you're talking about just a simple slant concept, he's saying, hey, do what you want to do at the line of scrimmage, right? But I need you here on my 5-step drop so I can, hit you between the numbers and hopefully give you an open lane. And I would imagine that being a problem, right? They go out there on the field. Garrett Wilson starts going into his bag, doing double crossover stuff at the line of scrimmage, maybe even taking some false steps, if you will, within his route running. And that is something I can imagine irking, again, Aaron Rodgers, a guy that's process driven, but also you just talk about the age gap and, you're going to get grumpy as you get older with stuff that you consider to be nonsense, right? So from that standpoint, I can say that Aaron Rodgers would have dealt with that situation reasonably well, but Zack Rosenblatt does go into the fact that I guess over the course of last year, Aaron Rodgers was complaining privately about Garrett Wilson. And this is interesting to me, right? Because what does this mean? Does this mean that he was, just mumbling stuff under his breath as he's going through the facility or practice? Does this mean that he's commenting this information and these concerns to guys like Mark Sklareth, who would have been in his inner circle, or maybe his new wife or whoever else, would have been willing to lend an ear to him that he trusts? Or does it mean that he's actually given this commentary to Robert Saleh? He gave it to wide receiver coach Sean Jefferson, gave it to Nathaniel Hackett, and nothing was really being done about it. Tough to say, hard to say, but still, I would say that it's a valid complaint. But if you're Aaron Rodgers, what Aaron Rodgers essentially does, if this is a valid complaint to him and what actually occurred, he puts himself in the same shoes Nathaniel Hackett was in with Breece Hall. I look at these situations very similar. Nathaniel Hackett had no idea that Breece Hall could catch until 3/4 into the season, right? This is essentially Aaron Rodgers saying, hey, I had no idea that Garrett Wilson likes to improv on some of his routes to make sure that he's getting open. Where were the scouting reports? You had the entire offseason before the trade took place where you were getting things moved into the spots that you wanted to, right, and manipulating the chess pieces. How did you not know that a guy that you've given high praise to and have given multiple Davante Adams references and comparisons to and really talked up the kid a ton, how do you not know that this is just naturally built into his game and isn't something that's just going to automatically change or even really be expected to change at all with the presence of you coming into the building? It's beyond me. It definitely speaks to things going over his head a little bit, or maybe just his unwillingness to adapt to some of the skill sets and or players within the building. Now, from Garrett Wilson's side, again, we had the blowups in the offseason, but Zack Rosenblatt does go into the fact that there were concerns not only from Garrett Wilson, but potentially some other members from both sides of the ball with Aaron Rodgers when it came to force-feeding Davante Adams once he arrived. And if you start piecing all these things together and kind of putting a timeline together, you start to say that maybe this does make more sense. You have Garrett Wilson in his face at multiple points in the offseason for situations that maybe he believes isn't his fault and or that Garrett Wilson is being a diva. You have the fact that you can't get him to consistently run routes in the way that you would like them to be run, and maybe that's causing the offense to look a lot more inefficient or not operate as smoothly as you would expect it to. And then now you get Davante Adams back and he's doing everything in the same manner that has been the case with many of your most successful years, right? So you're looking to really get that back on track, and then you figure out how to work things back out with Garrett Wilson. I could see that being the thought process. And then they also, or Rosenblatt does continue to go on again, talking about the negating of the run game, right? Aaron Rodgers specifically audibling out of run plays, and now you add into the comments that we had from Mark Sklareth about how he hated the scheme and the play calling, and maybe even to a degree what was happening in the run game with the actual players themselves. And then finally, his last point was the lack of targets in the red zone for Garrett Wilson, and for that being what should have been your primary weapon, at least up until the point of the Davante Adams trade, you can definitely make the argument that was true, right? And one of the things that ended up kind of being more of a premonition that came back to bite Aaron Rodgers in the butt was, I remember an interview where I think a reporter was asking him about the fact that, hey, you've never actually thrown to like a wide receiver picked in the first round or something along those lines, right? And he was talking about what the thought process is with just like a number one receiver in general, and the fact that you don't want to see that player not get any, balls thrown his way or anything until like the second quarter or the second half of games, because these guys are going out there, they're drawing double teams, they're doing things at a high level, which is why they're your number one. And you don't want to have them wasting a lot of energy or feeling like they're being phased out of a game plan, or that they, depending on what the defense could do, we're not adjusting to make sure that they can at least try to make an impact. And ultimately, it felt like that ended up occurring throughout the course of the season with him and Garrett Wilson, especially again after he moved on to Davante. So it's interesting to see the breakdown here. This shouldn't really be breaking news, but I think the fact that we're seeing more of these details come to light just lets us know that there were a ton more cracks in the armor of this team than what we generally expected going in, right? We thought everything was hunky-dory. He's coming back from the injury. He had a really solid chance in some people's mind to try to play if we could have made the playoffs last year. It's a relationship that doesn't seem like it had many problems in that first year with, Garrett Wilson essentially never having a true chance to actually operate with Aaron Rodgers. But then going into year two, you start to see things crumble really, really quick. So Let me know what you guys ultimately think, though. Was this kind of doomed from the start, and it's just a combination of a lot of factors like the age factor, and there's not going to be a ton to bond and build that chemistry with. Aaron Rodgers going on trips, the blow-ups in the off-season practices, and them appearing like they aren't on that same page, and really, now that I think about it, never getting on the same page. That ended up being, those 2 or 3 instances ended up kind of being omens for the season. But let me know what you guys think about the situation, and I'll catch you guys again. Peace.